take it back. I was just talking to Keith Pelzer, who you worked with in A Touch of Jazz, and he mentioned you were coming from Atlantic City in the beginning, and before coming to Philly. So in Atlantic City, how did you where did you get your start? How did you develop your skills there?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, when I was in Atlantic City, my interests were never really like towards music. I was always into athletics, always sports, and I fancy myself wanting to be, a ball player, which probably was the best idea to not do that because I sucked. So, but one of the places where I used to play basketball at was a rec center. It was like one of those city-operated rec centers, kind of like the Y type vibes. Mm-hmm. And that's where I met Darren Henson, who was a producer at the mall where we used to work at.
Yeah.
I worked at a clothing store. He worked at another shop in the mall, and I knew he rapped, and I knew he was always into hip hop, and I was into hip hop as a fan, and I dabbled a little bit, but never anything like super serious. And it wasn't until like the early 90s, I said, like 91, where I really got this strong interest in wanting to be a rap artist. Mm-hmm. So I started writing and started recording demos, and up until that time, my idea of wanting to be in the music industry, aside of it from being, was centered on me being an artist. Started running with this crew, and they used to give me beats, and then it got to the point where I couldn't get beats from them, so I started dabbling, and I had hand-me-down gear that I was tinkering around. It was like this little Casio SK1 sampler that typically has 24 keys and about for mixing. So it was like, when I said this was like really hand-me-down, it was like the bottom of the barrel. So I started, messing around, started making beats, and I got good. I got better, and the guys who used to give me beats started asking me for beats. So fast forward, me playing at the rec, I ran into Darren Henson again, who I had known from working at the mall together, and I found out he was in a crew, and it was, he was an artist, and he connected and stayed in touch. Then sometime around 95, I would say, we reconnected again, and we started, hanging out. I would come over his house to look at some records, and we always would talk about beats and stuff like that. And we went to a trip in New York, a record digging trip, and then we started talking about maybe we should put together a beat tape. I knew he knew Jazzy Jeff, and I said, look, we should put together a beat tape and go up to Philly and play for Jeff. And I kept him, and then we finally decided to do that and came up one Friday night. I remember that in 95. And it was probably the most important transitioning point in my life, I would say, as a music creator. Because when I came up to A Touch of Jazz that day, they had all these amazing musicians, playing all the instruments that up until that point I will only hear, or playing in the style of stuff that I will only hear on records that I wanted to sample.
Yeah.
And at that point I said, I gotta be here, I want to be around. And we played Jeff the beat tape. It was a whole bunch of hip hop beats. It was like kind of staggered, my beat, his beat, my beat, his beat. And Jeff heard it and was like, yo, you guys should come up next week if you're not doing anything. So it became this tradition where he would invite us every Friday night. So every time we would get off work, because we worked at the casinos at that time, we would get off work, come to Philly, and stay till like 4 in the morning, then take us back to Atlantic City or drive back to Atlantic City and go sleep an hour and go back to work.
Wow.
About 4 years, 3 or 4 years. But in the initial, in the beginning, and Jeff would, just invite us every Friday until he said, man, whenever you guys just want to keep coming up, just come up. To where we didn't need an invite anymore. And then we just became part of A Touch of Jazz, and we were just part of the clique. And I saw in Keith's interview, he was saying 12 people. It was really like 16 people at that time.
Oh, wow.
It eventually got scaled down because it was like a camp that was made up of like not only producers, but you had songwriters, you had artists, you had musicians, and little by moving away and doing their own thing. And then the 6 that remained became, the 6 that was concentrated as part of the Touch of Jazz brand and worked on those little albums.
Right.
But yeah, that's what it was. It was basically met Jeff through Darren Henson and came up and he invited us, and it became a weekly tradition that became coming up on my days off from work until I eventually was not working anymore. I got let go at Tropicana where I used to work at, and then I spent it about that 98, I believe, 98, 99 was the year that I was just pretty much like, okay, this is it. I got to go at it hard. If I don't go hard, it ain't happening.
Yeah.
And that was the year that we did all 98, 99. There was like a 12-month window in that time frame where we worked on Jill Scott music and met Floetry, and we did a lot of amazing music.
That's amazing. Amazing story. How did you even, link with Carvin as far as, because, what Keith was talking about, it was the 6 of you, it ended up being the 6 of you guys. Then you each formed like duos. So how was it that Carvin became, your partner?
Well, the thing about Carvin being my partner that was cool was that Carvin was a songwriter. And Carvin would, he made some pretty dope beats. I mean, Carvin got one of the dopest beats on the Words and Sound Volume 1, which is the Honey Molasses. But Carvin's interest was never really wanting to be a producer. He always wanted to be a songwriter. And I had beats. And a lot of people weren't writing to my music. So we connected. Carvin couldn't get beats. I couldn't get songwriters. So it was kind of like a mutually beneficial connection at first at a Touch of Jazz. And then Carvin's aesthetic was, a hip-hop aesthetic. And it was towards, having these hard beats with samples and wanting to write hip-hop lean-in type of R&B songs. So I gave him, I think I was, with my sound, I think I kind of aligned with what he was trying to do, and it just became a natural thing. It wasn't even like, let's team up. It just became natural. We just constantly working together, and eventually when we all went our separate ways, him and I worked so much, and we had a chemistry to the point that it just makes sense. We just kind of like, let's just keep what we're doing going and make it official.
Right. That's dope. And what was the environment like there from your perspective? All you guys there working at the same time. How did you view it at the time?
You know what, man? It was one of those things that is really hard to codify into words and say it was this way, because at that time when you're living through it, you have really no concept of what you're doing in terms of shifting the narrative and kind of like changing the way records are being made, et cetera, et cetera. Not to try to say our way was this amazing way, but, as far as like camps and what we were able to do and how we worked, it was, no one taught us that way. It was different. And I think a lot of it came from not only us being competitive, but also us being family-oriented and collaborative, where I could be working on a track and Vidal or Dre will walk in, or Keith Pelzer will walk in, because they were the guys who played. They were the musicians at that time before I actually developed some skills and started being able to play instruments. At that time, if I had a beat playing and Keith would walk in and he'd be like, that's crazy. And I'm like, can you do a bass line on this? And then, he'll walk in and do a bass. And then I could be walking into another room and Dre might be working, Andre Harris might be working on a track, and he's got some chords and something. I'm like, that's dope, like you should do the drums this way. And next thing I'm doing drums on that.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of like a really penalty-free way of making records, right? Where you're not really aligning yourself with the music industry ethos of, if I do this, then I got to get this. It really wasn't. It wasn't a commerce or a thing with us. We weren't thinking about the economic aspect of, I'm doing this, so you got to give me this if I do this. It was more so like, ooh, that's a dope track, okay? I'm going to help you with this. I got to come back and do something equally as crazy. And it was kind of like, it was a measuring stick for all of us. If someone did something dope and got a placement on an artist, we always cheered for them and celebrated that. We always felt like, okay, I gotta level up. I gotta step my game up. So it was a very great environment where we all kind of like cheer on each other and boosted each other and leaned on each other and learned, and it was unlike anything that I've ever been a part of, you know.
It's amazing. I love to hear these stories because it sounds, and I think that's what draws me so into the story of it, is it doesn't sound like anything like it was ever done. And I think, you know, Jeff kind of replicates that a bit with his playlist retreats, which also sound equally amazing. Just, you know, freedom of creation. I love to hear about it.
I mean, the playlist retreat is like a full-scale version of A Touch of Jazz.
Yeah.
And let me backtrack a little bit, because I don't want to misrepresent the camp aspect of music production as Touch of Jazz being the ground zero of it, because we saw what Mr. Gordy did with Motown.
Yeah.
We know what was going on at Stax. We knew what was going on in Philly International during that era of when Gambling Hub had the Philadelphia sound, which all that stuff predated me. Wasn't even born when a lot of those records were being made. A lot of those great artists were launched, right? But there was a communal aspect to those records being made in that era that I would say influenced the way Touch of Jazz operated, but it was a different type of energy. It was different because Jeff never came at us like, in a way that was tyrannical,
Yeah, that's dope.
It was in a way that he gave us all the opportunity to say, look, here's keys to the studio, here's the equipment, here's some paintbrushes, here's some canvas, here's some paint. I'm not going to tell you what to paint, but I can tell you what hours you can paint during, right? And we all had access to the studio. We all had access to the equipment. I sure the hell blew a lot of tweeters and woofers, that I never knew how much they cost and where the money to repair them came from. But I was very fortunate to have had access to what he provided us with, and I'm still forever grateful, because it was a great opportunity, man.
That's dope. So tell us about Musiq Soulchild. What was your first impression of him even coming in? I've heard the stories from the other producers who were there. When he was first coming around, what do you remember?
When he first came around, I just thought he was super dope, because he had this dope vibe about him. He was, of course, he was an R&B soul singer that he was trying to become also an artist in the ilk of like the Stevies and Donnies and following on what D'Angelo had already done. So he was an extension of that lineage. Mm-hmm. But what attracted me to him was his ability to really understand hip hop, right? And the way he approached music. He had this hip-hop aesthetic. He had this hip-hop energy about what he was doing that didn't feel like, just regular R&B soul music. I think because I identify with hip-hop culture so much, I always felt like the music needed a sense of urgency, a sense of immediacy, things that I found to be things endemic of rap culture. And I think he aligned with that. And I think us collaborating really tapped into that lane of, being able to make these records that align with things that hip hop fans, hip hop artists could gravitate towards and not feel like, oh, this is too soft for me. And I think that between him and Carvin and we had this interesting energy. But initially, that's what drew me to music is, we had a common admiration for a lot of the same music, hip hop music. He loved Dilla. I love Dilla. That's someone that I had the honor and pleasure of meeting and hanging out with and going on a beat digging trip and talking about records with. So I was really drawn to that culture of rap music, like the Ummah, Force Tribe and all of that sound, that jazzy hip hop sound. I always loved that sound, and I think with him being so him having such a passion for that sound made it easier for us to make the records we made, because they were coming from a place where it felt fun. You know, it felt like it was just too contrived and too orchestrated, which is probably what made me feel like R&B music at that time wasn't for me. You know, because I felt like R&B was just so advanced in terms of the approach and how you have to have a different mindset when you're in the studio working on those projects versus the sessions that I was used to being a part of when it came to like working on hip hop stuff.
Right.
And I think that was probably what was so unique about him. He kind of disproved the myth of what an R&B artist should be. It was totally recalibrated from what we worked on, and even to this day you can still feel the influence of that hip hop aspect of soul music that we were able to inject into those early records, resonated and help create and help really advance the genre in a way that it couldn't have if it didn't have that element.
Right. You're absolutely right, and it's funny because when I talk to him, he doesn't even like to be considered R&B or an R&B artist. He likes to be called hip-hop soul, and if you think about it, that's really truly what his music embodies. The original stuff, especially Aijuswanaseing, classic album. It's his 20th anniversary this year, and you had a big part in this album. Especially the lead single, Just Friends, Sunny. You're listed on the credits as a writer and producer on it. What do you remember about creating that one?
I mean, that's a special record, man. To me, is the seminal record for that evolution of neo soul. Mm-hmm. Even to this day, there's so many artists and producers and writers that come to me and reference that record, or even not even coming to me and still reference the record in interviews, doing covers, sampling it, performing it live. It's such a special record, and which really makes the story of it even greater. I remember that beat trip that I mentioned, that record digging trip. We went to Pittsburgh. It was myself, DJ Jazzy Jeff, Kenny Dope, Darren Henson, and Dilla. We all took a trip to Pittsburgh in '98. We went beat digging. We started in Philly on one day, and by the time we got back 2 days later, we went all the way to Pittsburgh and back and started hitting all these record shops. Mm-hmm. During that trip, Kenny Dope, he already knew the type of sound that I was partial towards, which was like I was telling you earlier, like that jazzy R&B funk, with Rose and all of that. So he said, "Look, I know you like this type of sound. Check out this label." And I'm looking at the record right now on my shelf right now. It's funny, I'm in my studio right now looking at it. And he goes, "You should check out this label. It's called Muse. This label has a lot of dope, jazzy, funky, soulful grooves, the type that you like to sample, and pass me this Pat Martino live album." Mm-hmm. And I'm like, all right, cool. I have plenty of records. So we get back to Philly a couple days later. I'm going to the record stash, and I'm like, all right, let me grab this record. And I knew the record from Bobby Ebbs. Bobby Ebbs hit early on in the '60s. That was called Sunny. But I'm like, oh, let me check out this version of Sunny. I always liked that groove. Put it on. I was like, this is pretty dope. Sampled it, slowed it down, looped it up. And up to that point, I'm like, literally, because at that time I was still rapping. I was still trying to be an artist. And I'm like, this is at a Touch of Jazz too. And I'm like, man, this is dope. Maybe I should just do a record to this. I like this. I like the groove. Da, da, da. So I got the beat playing, and here walks in Vidal, hears that joint. He's like, yo, that's dope. Let me add this bass line. I added this bass line and played like a little keyboard embellishment on top of it. And I'm looping it up, and Musiq walks in, hears me working on it, and he's like, yo, that's dope. I said, oh, you like it? He's like, yeah. And I had this weird little thing, these lyrics that I was saying, and he heard it and started singing those lyrics and embellishing it a little bit, and then disappeared. I think I made him a tape of that beat and a couple other stuff, and then disappeared for like a year.
Wow.
We hadn't heard, you know, he went to Atlanta to visit his family and moved down there for a year. Mind you, we had, you know, he already had recorded quite a few songs with Carvin. And then a year later, he comes back, and I remember this was like around Thanksgiving. We were in the studio, and he was like, "Yo, you still got that beat that you was playing me that day?" And I pulled it up, and then him and Carvin finished writing and wrote it, and it became that record, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like that record has so many different stories attached to it of how long it took. And even when we were in the studio, Darren was like, "Yo, you guys should start it with the beatbox." Because Musiq was in the booth beatboxing while Keith recorded that record. He recorded the session for us. He was the engineer for the vocal session.
Yeah.
So as we were trying to get sound and trying to figure out, you know, how to, you know, what was going on in terms of like patching it to the mic pre, something was wrong with it in the room at that time. Somebody came in and disconnected some wires. So we're like doing technical stuff. So as we're doing technical stuff, music is like, he's beatboxing in the studio. In the booth. Wow. Doing that, just playing around while we're waiting. And Darren goes, "Yo, that's dope. You guys should start the record like that." We were like, "Yeah, start the record like that." So we figured out. At that time, you know, it was tricky flying things because we didn't have a lot of, you know, DAWs at that time. We were basically recording on DA-88s. So when Musiq went and put it in there, Keith flew it in, and it just kind of faded in, and you hear it start with the record, and the beat fades in, and then it was like a moment, you know. It became like the most recognizable intro to a record of ours. You know, and it just set the tone for the life that record was going to eventually live.
I love it, man.
But and it was just different, you know, because trying to, just a little nerd geek out production question. Point of information. That sample was like really off, right? The way I caught it. In order for me to get it to loop perfectly, I had to kind of like program the drums in a way where it didn't feel sloppy against that sample. So you had this groove where the kick was kind of on, but the snare was rushed.
Wow.
And then the hi-hat really laid back, and it kind of helped enhance the sound, which was kind of like this little interesting bounce that it had, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And definitely was some Dilla-esque moments in it, and some Dilla influences, because I was listening to a lot of Slum Village back then. I had a bunch of his beat tapes. He had given myself and Darren some of his beat tapes, because we were still in a group at that time. We were trying to rap to some of those beats, so I was listening to a lot of that stuff. But then it was kind of became this, you know, part of this production aspect of mine, where it's like, you know what, I should have quantized anything. So that groove was like kind of loose, but on at the same time, and it helped add to the bounce of the song. That kind of helped cement it with this bounce that it had that we really didn't have in R&B at that time.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Definitely unlike anything we had at the time, and that's why we love it so much, and that's why it's still in rotation to this day. Amazing work on that one.
Thank you, man.
And another song which was really unique, which you had on this album, Paparazzi, and I was talking to Carvin about this one, and you know, recently, and he was mentioning the fact that, you know, the word paparazzi is the title of the song. It's not even in the song in anywhere.
Say it. But goofball singing music.
But it's another unique song. I love this one as well. What do you remember about putting that one together?
That's another one where, you know, I found it. I remember finding a sample, and I was like, "This is crazy." And I was working on it, and for no particular reason, this was just me, you know, working on beats for the catalog, and I remember working on it, and Dre walked in. It was like Andre Harris. And this is part of like what we were saying earlier, how anyone can walk in the room at any given moment, hey, you working on something, and just add to it. And he came in and added these strings, you know, under the sample, and it just made it so epic. It made it just, it was a dope sample to begin with, but it injected this other energy to it. And when Carvin and Musiq, and we also had another record that we did during that session that was called Stop Playing that became another song on Just Listen.
Wow.
That had a similar vibe. It was like, you know, Dre and I used to work on a lot of music together.
Yeah.
But those were 2 records we worked on together for music. That indirectly, that weren't even for music. It was just basically I had these tracks, and you know, he came in and added and embellished them. And Musiq always loved that sound. It was for some reason a lot of times him and Dre collaborated. He tended to gravitate towards those records. And Paparazzi was another one. Production-wise, it was something that just did not feel conventional the way the drums were hit, you know?
Right.
It was like a different non-4, it's still a 4/4 groove, but it wasn't your typical kick snare groove. It was something a little bit different, and it worked for what they were doing. And it's funny you say, like, Paparazzi doesn't even say that word anywhere in the lyrics. Yeah. Right? They don't even spell the damn word right.
I didn't even notice that.
Nobody even knows that song, what that means. It's just like Paparazzi, what is that? So they thought it was some French term or something, right? But it was a clever, cheeky way of, you know, saying picture me while I'm sitting here down and out, you know? So it's one of those songs that are deep, one of those deep cuts on an album that sometimes, you know, early on a lot of people really didn't get, but over time it became a fan favorite, and people will always mention that over the years, more recently than early on. And it's crazy to think that it's been 20 years. Jesus.
Yeah, definitely love that one as well. And I can't forget to mention, you know, this one was a bonus track, and I think it was on Angie Stone's album as well, but that was The Ingredients of Love. You did that one as well, right?
Yeah, produced that one as well. That one was inspired by a Tribe Called Quest song on Midnight Marauders.
Wow. I love
it. I won't say the title because the title is an offensive word, but it's on there. But yeah, it was a replay. Frank Romano played the guitar over. It was a Jack Wilkins Red Clay original by Freddie Hubbard, but it was a really dope record. And funny, how about this? I got a record with Marsha doing that song first.
Wow.
she was doing a song for Bilal that was super dope. I got to dig it up now. I know it's somewhere on some dad tapes. But Marsha did a really dope song to that. Like I said, for Bilal. And you know, I don't think Bilal. I don't know if he heard it or didn't like it or passed on it. I can't remember. But I remember about a year later, we were in the studio with Angie, and I played that beat, and Carvin and Musiq heard it, and they were like, "Yo, this is a dope beat for that song." And we just ended up doing it with Angie, which was a dope song in itself.
That's dope, man. I would love to hear that someday if that ever makes the archives.
I gotta look for that, but it was a dope song.
You know, as far as the rest of your time at A Touch of Jazz, you know, obviously with Jill being there early on, Flowetry, you know, and then, you know, you guys all decided to leave eventually. I guess just take it back to what do you remember about, you know, artists like Jill and Flowetry coming through and just working with these artists who we know now as some of the all-time greats of the past few generations, or decades, but what do you remember about being in that moment around them?
They fit right in, you know. I think we had a really interesting culture at A Touch of Jazz. It was very family-oriented. We always joked, and we always hung out together, whether we were going to South Street or we were going to L.A. or anywhere else, on, you know, whether, you know, for work or whatever it was. We always had this clique, very insular culture, and they fit right in. You know, Jill was super cool. She was one of the best things that happened to A Touch of Jazz, because up until that time, a lot of the artists that will come through, that major labels would set down, we really couldn't control the sound. We would work on a bunch of records, and then it would be like, yeah, we only want to take this one record, and we felt like, man, we're doing amazing music on all these artists, and at the end of the day, you really can't control it. And when Jill came in, she was the perfect vessel for, and I don't want to reduce it to that because Jill contributed immensely to that sound. You know, without her, I don't think we have that sound that became so associated with not only A Touch of Jazz, but just Philly, you know?
Yeah.
But I think what she did for a lot of us that were working at A Touch of Jazz was she gave us the platform to create those songs.
Right.
And it was a mutual labor where, you know, that allowed those songs to be special. And she definitely had a unique approach because she was also a poet and she was also an actress. So her energy was not, you know, so consolidated into this R&B thing. That's the funny thing about it. If you notice, all three of those artists that we're talking about, Jill, Musiq, and Floetry, they were not R&B artists.
Yeah. Yeah.
Neither one of them, they weren't R&B artists.
Yeah.
You see where I'm getting at, right?
Yep.
They had definitely a lot of soul music influence, but Jill was a poet first. Mm-hmm. You know, Musiq was, you know, a beatboxing, rapping singer. Floetry, you had Marsha, who was dope as a singer, but you had then the other dynamic to that was Natalie, who was a poet and a rapper, who also liked hip hop beats, and they were from London, and they were influenced by a lot of, you know, Jamaican music and all of these different things that added to all, you know, the dynamic, like that really showed you that R&B was not the root of the Touch of Jazz movement, and that's right. What makes it unique. It was, you know, you look at the name A Touch of Jazz, which is of course a point on Jeff's name, but you know, Touch of Jazz. Jazz is everything. You know, jazz is the root and the seed for a lot of the indigenous art forms that came out of the, you know, America, right?
Right.
Jazz influenced everything, and look, there it is, A Touch of Jazz.
Yep.
All of the music that you heard was really part of the DNA of jazz music as it evolved over the years in our culture. So that's what made those artists so unique and so special. They really fit in. They fit in with the culture, and they gave it as much as they received it in terms of the jokes and all of that. And it was really a family atmosphere. So nothing too out of the ordinary, other than to say that they never really had that separation between artists and producers, and never made us feel like, you know, we're better than y'all. I mean, we were all building something together, and right. It became something special towards the end.
It's amazing. I just got two more questions for you. I don't want to take up too much of your time. First is, you know, talk about leaving A Touch of Jazz and what it was like, and, you know, as far as stepping out on your own.
I think at that time, the reason we all left was, it's no secret, I think the economic aspect played a huge role. Yeah. It was not, might have been a bit of tension at that time, but something that over the years has become non-existent, considering the relationship I have with Jeff and the friendship that we have and the things we've collaborated on since then. But at that time, I felt like, you know, when we all left, it was something that I felt was bound to happen. I wish it would have maintained, but the trajectory that we were all going towards, it lent itself to that, you know. Mm-hmm. It lent itself towards us having to go out and do things on our own and grow as businessmen and as creators and as contributors of the culture. Right. You know, and I think that was one thing that Jeff always facilitated to a lot of the people that he mentored. You know, like, I looked at his studio and his production company as an incubator of sort. I mean, James Poyser came out of that camp. Yeah. So did Victor Duplaix. Mm-hmm. So did Eric Roberson. So did Raheem DeVaughn, you know. And when you really look at a lot of the artists and producers and songwriters that grow and evolve, that's one thing that I would say that Jeff is. He's a facilitator, and he teaches you a lot, and it's up to you to learn it. Mm-hmm. And eventually people have to grow and do things that will further their mission and keep the trajectory going upwards. And that's what it was. I, as much as it may have been a bit of attention and people try to play it up into this major beef, because I remember giving interviews with a certain New York Times writer right now at that time.
Yeah.
He took my words for this magazine and twisted it up and trying to sensationalize it, but it was really nothing there.
Yeah.
That's my relationship with him. I have no beefs with him.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then just finally, take us up to date. I mean, you're doing some exciting things, with the Recording Academy for the Grammys. You just implemented the big change, helped be a part of that. Talk about that and some of the other things you've been doing lately.
Well, I got involved with the Recording Academy back in 2007. I was participating in the awards process, and then eventually I became a governor a couple years later for the Philadelphia chapter. That was, I would say, 2009, and then 2012, I ran for chapter president, which I served for 3 years, and then I kept being involved. I used to chair one of the awards committees at the Recording Academy. After that, I became trustee, and doing my work there, I helped implement some changes in the awards process. Originally, the category that you're referring to that was changed, we had some restructuring that was done a few years earlier, and one of the categories in R&B, which was called Contemporary R&B Album, was condensed into R&B Album, which created this gridlock between more traditional legacy-based R&B against the contrast of the more modern aesthetics of R&B production, and all like amalgamated into this hodgepodge, to where you had artists like Chris Brown going up against artists like Lettucey and Shaka Khan and El DeBarge, which actually resulted in Chris Brown being nominated one year and winning. So on that plane ride home, I'm like, no, this can't be. Next year, we're going to have a problem, because we have Frank Ocean, Miguel, The Weeknd. We have all these artists coming out who are doing this derivative and evolved version of R&B music that they cannot be. You can't penalize them and put them in this category with other R&B artists who are more traditional and keeping the spirit of R&B alive. So submitted a proposal to create a new category, and at that time I came up with the name, and it was Urban Contemporary, and it encompassed all of the derivatives that were contributing to that new evolved progressive version of R&B music. And it was the first year that it was a category. Frank Ocean wins it for Channel Orange. So it was cool. People were still looking at it like, okay, what does urban contemporary mean? Why do you use urban? And then eventually, 2 or 3 years later, I started doing all these interviews having to defend the term urban, and words taken out of context, people taking shots, and my name being thrown out there like I created this racist ass category and whatnot. And it got to the point that I was like, but we did it in the spirit of preserving the integrity of both categories and making sure that R&B was not diluted. So I said, we have to change his name. And it took about 4 years. We started the dialogue last year, and it predates all of the stuff that we've been dealing with since the death of George Floyd, where you started seeing a lot of the social aspects to the culture, making sure that things that are oppressive and endemic of systemic racism were become eradicated, right? Long before that, we decided that we got to get rid of the urban. So we started wrote a proposal, started having dialogue, got so many signatories from the community, a lot of executives, a lot of artists, songwriters, producers signed on to this massive proposal. And we proposed that we rename Urban Contemporary to Best Progressive R&B Album, keeping the definition intact and expanding it to be more inclusive. And to me, it was a way to future-proof the category and the field of R&B against anything that came in the future. And then May 26th happened, and then the conversation shifted to a cultural conversation of social responsibility, and a lot of record labels started saying, hey, we got to drop the term urban from the nomenclature from our processes.
Right.
And it created this noise where it became so polarizing, it was pitting people against each other with respect to black music at the record label structure, where you're saying, should we keep urban? Because if you do away with urban, that means you're getting rid of black music, and you're folding it up to the other departments. And other people saying, well, we should drop it and adopt other nomenclature, et cetera, et cetera. But we got caught in all the noise. People, by the time we announced it, and we had passed it long before that, but we couldn't announce it because a lot of the stuff that happens during the trustees meeting they usually get announced in early June. By the time we were set to announce it, we had a lot of the protests going on, and the Academy felt that we shouldn't take away from that energy,
right,
by announcing something so self-serving as like our awards categories and the changes and all of that. So we punted to June 10th, and by that time, Republic had announced what they had announced as far as urban, and other people already feeling like, they were either for or against. And when we announced it, people felt it was performative from the Academy. So we did a couple panels and participated on some events, trying to get people to understand that this was not done as a way to hijack the movement. It was done in a way to really future-proof our processes and future-proof our categories and make it more inclusive rather than exclusive.
Right.
It doesn't mean that we feel, we have to get rid of the word everywhere else. That's the conversation for the label structure to actually, which is a valid one, a fair one.
Yeah.
That should exist in that realm. How we did it was solely for academic purposes, So hopefully it will prove to be the right decision over time, and people will understand the value of renaming that category.
Wow.
But I currently also co-chair the Producers and Engineers Wing at the Academy, which is one of the committees that represents producers and songwriters internally. We have about 7,000 out of the 12,000 voting members. 6,000, 7,000 are producers and engineers inside the Academy. So it's a sizable voting body. So we put together a lot of initiatives geared towards the industry as a whole, not just specific to producers and engineers. We lobby Congress within the Recording Academy Advocacy structure, where we try to advocate for the rights of all music creators. I've been to D.C. lobbying so many times, trying to get them to pass legislation. Lobbied locally here, participated in a lot of different grassroots initiatives to make sure that our rights are preserved and they hear us as creators, and also making sure that even now with COVID-19 being what it is and how it's affected our industry, we put together a set of guidelines that are actually on the Recording Academy's page, advising studios and studio professionals of things that they can do to mitigate a lot of the risks in the studio. Because think about it, the studios, as we know it, the studio environment is it's a petri dish for the virus.
Yeah.
So we have to take many steps if we want to keep getting the same music we've been getting. We have to take steps and to try to work in a prudent manner to make sure we're not putting anybody at risk, and our industry is not one that is deemed as a long-term risk to where you can't even do sessions anymore. So if we can protect ourselves, that will be the best thing for all of us. And those guidelines hopefully will give people some clarity as we move towards all these green and phase 4s and all of these different phases.
Right.
And then creatively, still very active. I'm currently working with a band out of Brooklyn called Phony People.
Yeah.
Working with them on their album. We currently have a single that's been performing pretty good at radio right now. It's called Messing Around is the clean version, Fucking Around is the dirty version. featuring Meg Thee Stallion on it. So it's pretty cool. Currently trying to finish up their album. They're super dope. They're R&B, soul, funk with a lot of hip hop elements. intertwining. And so it's right up my alley, based on what we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Also working with this kid named Loveman Soy, dope artist signed to Warner. And Lettucey, got a song coming out with her on the upcoming album, and other things as well. So I'm still very active, and Zoom life is the life. I spend so much time working with people, via Zoom and this plugin called Listen To, where they can listen to what I'm working on in high def. And it's just trying to be as active and as involved as I can be given the current circumstances.
Right. I'll tell you what, man, I have so much respect for all you're doing behind the scenes, advocating for other artists and making positive change. I mean, from my perspective, I know it's even harder now. We don't get liner notes like we used to. So from my perspective, I try to work even harder to bring, spotlights on producers and songwriters like yourself who don't always get the recognition they deserve. So I've always had so much respect for what you do, and I will continue to always support you, man.
Thank you, man. And even to your point about liner notes, that's actually a producer and engineer's initiative. Credits. We're trying to give fans the credits, and we're working with different partners like Jackster to be able to provide credit and as a means to help expand the awareness of who's doing what on records, and also make it, because when there are credits available, creates a better compensation model for people. It's easier to track down people. So metadata is something that's part of like our initiatives and working with other partners because of that. So I'm glad that gives me an opportunity to plug that.
Major respect for taking on projects like those. Not everyone is willing to. That makes a big difference.
Yeah, man. It's that CIA work. When no one knows what you're doing, and you don't even get a medal when you're done, but you know it's necessary work to for the security of the country, right? Absolutely. The same thing is our ecosystem, is our industry, and we have to do everything we can to preserve it. And I want to lead by example. I'm not saying, hey, look at me, pat me on the back. Hey, I did my service. I contributed. I step away. Who's got next? That's how it should be. And I think that's the only way we keep this thing thriving and keep the machine oiled and working and working for everyone in the way that it was intended. We all got to get off the bleachers, man, and be a part of the change that we all want to see. Right.
I love it, man. Much respect for doing that. Hey, man, before you go, I got to shout you out for one more song you did. I think this might be one of your more lesser-known songs, but I recently rediscovered it, and I've been playing it on repeat. I didn't even know you did it. And then
what song is that?
It's an artist named Lena. Bye Bye Baby.
Yo, Bye Bye Baby.
I love that song, man.
Yo, that's funny. Lena's the homie too.
Yeah, she's cool.
That was my first session that brought me to LA to work.
Wow, really?
Lena, yeah. It's funny, like we worked on it, and shout out to Travis, who did a lot of the songs on the album, produced a lot of the stuff with Lena. If you can find his last name, I just know Travis. I forgot his last name. I'm pretty sure you can research that, for the article.
Travis House.
That was one of the Travis House. Yes, amazing baseball player too.
Nice.
That was one of the first songs that she did because she came to A Touch of Jazz as a writer. That could be a little bonus in the article if you want to. But just for you, for your own insights. Yeah. We used to always try to collaborate with songwriters, and she was one of the writers that the management team at that time set up to come in and work, and she was doing a lot of work with Keith Pelzer and myself.
Wow.
And I remember playing her that song. It was just different, man. It was like a sample from the Graduate soundtrack, Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah.
And it was this really like Great Gatsby-esque type,
yes,
type of vibe, bro. It was different.
Yeah.
Flapper hats.
Yeah.
It was a flapper dress type vibe, right? It definitely had like this Roaring 20s type weird vibe to it. And I did this track. And I remember playing it for her, and she was like, that's dope. And then she sent it back to me like a month later, like, yo, I did this song to this track you gave me. This is crazy. Can you come to LA and work on this album with me? And I'm like, I can't get to LA. It was weird. I don't know why I couldn't get to LA, but either I was too broke or I don't know what it was. Yeah. But then it became something that became a foundation for her sound. I think it was called Stranger on Earth. Was
yes.
the name of that album,
yep.
right?
Correct.
And it was always a special song, man.
Yeah.
It's a really special song.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know about.
When I talked to her, though, she said that was a fan favorite, believe it or not, so.
Really?
Yeah, so at least that. But you matched her sound perfectly with that production. I mean, that, you know, she had a totally different vibe from anyone at the time, and you matched it. I felt like you stepped out of your comfort zone and maybe did something different and it worked.
Yeah, it was definitely super dope, man. Really enjoyed working with her, and a lot of the songs that I've been a part of, they always have an interesting, unique story. Maybe not all of them, but at least some key songs. And I think that's the dope part about this journey as a music creator and a music maker, is that you're making so much history along the way, whether you're aware of it or not.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
And that's probably what keeps me devoted to the craft and keeps me respecting the craft. I don't mail it in, you know. I try to make sure that everything I do, whether it's going to be heard and experienced by millions
mm-hmm.
or hundreds,
right.
I still approach it with the same intent, because I think that just doing good work and making sure that, you know, you strive for excellence each time. You never know when it's going to be discovered. You never know what it's going to be when it becomes something.
Right.
So I try not to get encumbered with the whole notion of like, oh man, this indie artist, nobody's gonna ever heard of it. Let me give them some weak shit. No,
yeah.
That's not how it works.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Definitely making history, and that's why I love doing these interviews, man. Because you share so many stories, and there's so many people out there who love these stories. It connects the dots of how music was made, and it just helps us appreciate the music even more, man. We love it.
I used to love watching that VH1 series back when they were about music.
The
100 greatest songs, 100 greatest artists, whatever.
Yeah.
And they were all, the fact that it was so anecdotal, you know, they would go into each song and rock music, or the 100 greatest songs of the 60s, whatever it was that Mark McGrath used to be the host of.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there, because they would cover 100 songs across 4 hours, right? Like 4 or 5 hour blocks. I would sit there actually watching that, like, wow. And I felt like I learned so much about artists and music that predated me. And this was like late 90s, early 2000s, I remember. And that anecdotal aspect of talking about those songs
mm-hmm.
pulled me in, which made me actually want to go listen to the songs even more and want to and immerse myself more into the process. And I wish we did that more with our music. And I think now, like, your funny thing you're saying, you reached out because of the 20-year aspect of Aijuswanaseing,
mm-hmm.
that now makes people want to learn more about those sessions. And you're not aware about it when you're living through it, when you're walking through it, when you're creating those songs. You're totally detached from the historical aspect of it. That's why I said you have to make sure you do good work, and you make sure you're the recorded excellence is paramount, because at some point they're going to come knocking on the door asking you, hey, what about those songs?
Yeah.
Talk to me about it. So you got to be able to, you know, be willing to die on that hill.
Yeah. I love it, man.